that question. If I have a parent that comes to me and demands something that's outside the realm of what's legal or what can be done, or just not listening to any reasoning whatsoever, there's really not much I can do. And the parent really cuts off their own avenue for help, because no one is going to advocate harder or more for them than me. There is no representative that fights harder for the people than I am. There's no representative that holds a stronger, deep-rooted feeling for representation than me. I make sure that every person is gotten back to, every phone call is returned, every email. I do everything that I can to reach out to the neighborhood meeting groups. I even go to the neighborhood group leaders just periodically to check in to see if anyone's complained about anything or there's been any questions. So I field things indirectly, I field things directly. I do whatever I can to advocate for them. In fact, interestingly enough, one of my political opponents brought a couple of items up that he was concerned about, and I've been addressing those. And I don't let things go. I continue to address them repeatedly over and over again, and every time there's an issue, like the heat in the frost school was an issue, every time that comes up, I throw it in everyone's face that they're not doing anything about it, that I tried to do something and they put obstacles in the way, and that this is an issue. And I berate and beat the administration over the head with something that was a concern of one of the parents in my community. So representation for me holds no boundaries. Even if it was a political opponent or someone who just didn't really have good intentions or anything, if they have a concern, I don't let it go, and I advocate for them as strong as I can.
Now, every citizen has a moral duty to expose wrongdoing or corruption. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
So why do you think it took so long to get rid of Dr. LaBoy?
I'll tell you, because it's a leadership thing. A leader, and you got to remember, I'm not looking at this from a current perspective. I'm going back to when I was 18, well, actually 16, when I was student council president, when I was in the Marines. And leadership is when you see something that's wrong or something that is corrupt is brought to your attention, you act upon it. If you do not act upon something that you know is wrong or something that is brought to your attention, you are not a leader. And you therefore should not be in a leadership position. If someone brings something to my attention that's wrong, I'm obligated, just by moral decency and just the sheer fact that any leader would, act on that issue. So I'm internally obligated to act when someone brings something to my attention. And if I didn't, then I'm unfit to hold that seat. And there's a lot of people on the committee, the city council, and elected officials throughout. They have no leadership.
And what would you do different to make sure that that leadership that the people need becomes a reality in Lawrence?
Well, I mean, I can do what I can on my end. I help people when they ask for information, when they want to meet. I give anything I can to anyone I can. I meet, I go places and talk to people. I've working on getting commitments from people that are running for office now to do an audit of Lawrence Public Schools, to cut back on funding for the Department of Education if they fail to respond or meet any of the requests from people like me. So I'm working on that end of it. But really, people have to get up off their butt, stop putting lawyers and corrupt officials in all these positions. They have to go and they have to look at their neighbor and say, you know, that's a stand-up guy. That's a guy I would like to have on the school committee. Let's get him to run and let's support him. That's what they need to do. And until they get off their butts and do that, we're always going to be having these problems.
And what is Lawrence School doing now in regards to maybe the bullying that just passed?
Well, I'm not up to speed on that.
So the school committee hasn't met in regards to what rules and what?
We have a discipline code, and I haven't reviewed it fully, and I'll tell you why I haven't reviewed it fully. Well, there are things like a book, but when I see something that's problematic or riddled with issues and problems and concerns, I'm not going to spend my time absorbing hours into something that really should be put in the trash. When it comes to the issue of like discipline and violent kids, really what needs to be done and should be getting done are things that are being done successfully in other communities and states. And one of those things is having parent volunteers in the classrooms. You look at a place like Lawrence, where you have a lot of people that could benefit from learning computer skills, learning English, where we have so many ESL people in the city. They could volunteer in the schools and sit in the classes with their kids, get an education. And in exchange for that, when these kids start acting up, become violent or aggressive, the teacher can say, Mr. Smith, would you call, Joe's parents and tell them to come to the school and get him? He's obviously not behaving properly. That parent goes down, calls the kid's parents, come pick up your kid. I can't believe the way this kid is acting. You need to deal with this. That's one way to deal with the violence. We have parent liaisons in schools. It's a Title I federal requirement. They get paid, not big bucks, but they get paid. And they sit in the schools. They can make phone calls. They can make phone calls to parents. And teachers have a responsibility, I believe, to act on this, especially when they're young. Because if they continue this behavior for 8 years, they get into high school, and now it's the drinking, the fights, the drugs, and everything that's going on in Lawrence. And the reason why this has been allowed to continue is because these superintendents are obsessed with keeping federal reporting numbers up. So if they kick these kids out of school, their numbers drop. So that's their incentive. They don't care about the other kids in the school. They care about numbers. That's it.
So basically they have to keep a certain percentage.
Keep the numbers up. And that's why we have School for Exceptional Studies. The name of it, when you hear School for Exceptional Studies, you're thinking, gee, that kid's top 10% material, probably going to go on to college, right? No, these are problematic kids. But we label and we hide what's going on in the system. We can't do that. If I want my kid to go to school to learn, if my kid doesn't do that, we have an issue at home. All of my kids know that they go to school to learn, nothing else. Everything else is secondary. That is their job. I go to work, they go to work at school. Their job is to learn. So it's spelt out for my kids. And when my kids go, the teachers have an obligation to make sure the environment and the materials and instruction is there for that child. If there's another child whose parents aren't as obligated as I am, who's disruptive, he needs to be removed. That child needs to be removed. And you need to have a discussion with the parent saying, listen, I have 29 other students that want to learn. You deal with your son so that he can be one of those 29. That's how we need to deal with that. And that's not what's going on.
Now, how much money did Lawrence get this year? I think it was like $32 million, is that?
Well, 32 was the grant money.
Okay.
And what was it? 143 thereabouts was the what we call Chapter 70 money. So you put those two together, it's 177. Now, what's funny is the school committee has never actually voted on the budget for this year. So we're spending money that hasn't been authorized. And according to Massachusetts general law, in the Chapter 44 laws, the grant money has to go into a special account and it has to be appropriated by the school committee, by law. That grant money, as far as I know, last year is being spent without school committee approval, and I know this year is being spent without school committee approval because I'm on the school committee. And to validate that, I had requested from the superintendent the vote that appropriated last year's grant money, and she refuses to give that out.
Well, can you get that under public information without paying for it?
Well, the thing of it is I'm an elected official, so I refuse to do it. Because when I ask for something, I should be getting it. If I don't get it, there has to be consequences. And I went into the comptroller's office Wednesday on my day off to ask for a city budget because I want to take a look at the city budget next to the school budget, and I want to put the two pieces of the pie together and see where all the money's going. Well, he refused to give it to me. Their office did. Now, we pay for his office and his staff. The school does. School pays for a lot of city services. School pays for over 80% of the nurses, even though any state reimbursement money goes into the city general fund. So the city's making quite a good kickback off the school system. So when I walk in there and I ask for something, I expect to get it. And the consequences for his office is going to be, when we get rid of the rubber stamps like Bonet and Morris, who, according to the city charter, are not even supposed to be on the school committee. According to 10.9 of the Lawrence City Charter, they're not allowed to be on that school committee. But they are because there's no enforcement. If they get replaced, or next election they get voted out, people like the comptroller who refuse to comply with very simple requests, I will stop their funding. So there will be accountability, but you have to have the people elected in the seat to do it, people like me.
We have about a minute left to go on the show. How qualified was Dr. LeBoy to be school superintendent?
On paper, to be honest, I'm not sure I even saw any of his credentials.
My understanding is, and maybe you can answer this real quickly if you can, my understanding that it took him 7 tries before he actually passed the educational superintendent.
Well, I think the big thing was it took 3 times to him to do the English literacy. But what's funny about that, and I can only speak to what I heard, is that he had a cell phone stuck in his ear while he was taking it and scored a perfect score, even though he failed it twice before. So, you know, you take that for what it's worth.
Well, I want to thank you for coming in, and I'd like to have you again on sometime on some other show.
Sure.
Once again, I want to thank the staff at MCTV, the crew, and I want to thank you for watching. This is Behind the Scenes. I'm your host, Hector Montalvo. Join us next time when we go behind the scenes to ask the tough questions, bring you their responses, and we let you decide. Thank you for watching.